I'm Farah Samuel, Manager Corporate Innovation, and I wish you all a very warm welcome today. I would like to extend my gratitude to all the guests who've come here from different organizations. Thank you for joining us today at the 4th episode of Duckstories 2022. I would also like to express my gratitude to my TP family who showed up today for this episode. Whilst I'm sure most of you are familiar with Duckstories and what they are, for those who are not, let me tell you about them. Duckstories is an initiative of Telenor Velocity, our corporate accelerator. It's a flagship initiative, a platform that allows entrepreneurs to celebrate failures shamelessly. We encourage entrepreneurs to talk about failures, challenges, and setbacks that put them on a trajectory to success. Today, we are here to talk about a topic seldom spoken of: exit and the life after. We have had a very few examples from Pakistani startup ecosystem taking on a journey to exit. For example, the Raz that was acquired by Alibaba, then very recently, Cloudway acquired by DigitalOcean. And though it's seldom spoken of, it is one of the greatest and most desirable milestones for any startup. Today, I have a beautiful story of a Pakistani startup that made it to exit successfully. I am talking about Tez Financial Services. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Naureen Hyat and Humza Hussain, the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Operating Officer of ZoodPay. Thank you, Humza and Naureen, for coming all the way from Lahore and Karachi. Naureen had an early morning flight. I hope you're not groggy by now.
No, I'm used to it. I think that's what you get used to when you're entrepreneurs. A lot of my friends over here would know that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I think without further ado, we'll start with this episode. And I'll begin by saying that you both have a profound history of your entrepreneurial journey because you co-founded Tez Financial Services. So let's set this conversation into motion by talking about how it all began, where it all began from, and then we'll steer the conversation towards exit and the life after. So over to you guys.
I think सबसे पहले तो a very very big thank you for the generous introduction. It's very humbling to hear someone speak those words for us. But I think, Humza, why don't you start? Because I am always the first one to start our story. I think you do a better job. You're much better at articulating stories.
Absolutely. And again, thank you all for showing up, and thank you for Telenor for hosting this. So Naureen and I have been working together for about 10 plus years now. We met it in the most boring of places that one can imagine, a credit rating agency. And for those of you who do not know what a rating agency is, it's where you kind of analyze risk for corporates. And अक्सर आपने बैंक के ऊपर देखा होगा AAA या AA लिखा होता है. That's what we used to analyze. That's where Naureen and I met. And one of the things that we kind of worked on was the microfinance sector and analyzing risk in the microfinance sector. और उसके अंदर हमें एक जो चीज़ interesting लगी थी वो ये थी कि any of the top corporate entities that go ask for a loan, get it at maybe like Kybor +1, Kybor +2 के ऊपर उनको borrowing मिल जाती है. But आम आदमी अगर माइक्रो फाइनेंस के पास जाता है उसको 36-35% पे borrowing मिल रही होती है. And constantly microfinance was pushed as something to empower individuals for, but this 36-35% didn't necessarily make sense. And so I think that's where kind of Naureen and I were diving deep into this. कि ये critique क्यों हो रही है? Does it make sense? Are they just making too much profit? Is it usury? What is happening? And I think that's where this kind of Tez journey came out, because we realized that the sector was extremely inefficient because it was very much dependent on paper process and then people process and then extremely time consumptive. And we thought कि यार very simply we thought कि अगर हम इसको digitize कर दें तो ये तो problem solve हो जाएगी. And so 2014 we kind of took this jump where we quit our jobs without really understanding कि startup क्या होता है, ecosystem क्या होता है. I have a couple of people here who were extremely helpful in kind of that initial journey, kind of bouncing off these ideas and I think we just kind of jumped in and said कि यार हो जाएगा. और 2 साल बड़ी मार खाई हमने. And I think we went door to door to every microfinance organization saying, listen, this is what you should do, you should introduce tech, blah, 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 and nothing happened. And I think it was those 2 years where we kind of realized that having an idea is one thing, making a business is completely something else. And I think then different types of partnerships kind of happened, and we were able to grow to a level where we then ended up finding our third partner, which is Nadeem. And I think Telenor is like reasonably familiar with him. And then that partnership kind of grew into Tez. So that's a small...
So Tez was actually a transition from our first startup, which was Check-in Solutions. And then Tez came into being. So Check-in was also a fintech. And this was at the time when, we didn't even talk about, terms like entrepreneurship or even, VC ka naam hi nahi suna tha. We didn't even know what funding really meant, what valuations meant.
I think we'd never seen a term sheet before.
Yes, that too. So yeah, I think how it happened was that I think I was always critiqued for the fact that I'm actually shamelessly, I negotiate and I try a lot shamelessly, but then I think you have to keep that ego aside when you're an entrepreneur. So remember
I would agree.
I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's how we met Nadeem Saab actually, and he's probably going to, penalize me for saying that. But I actually messaged him on LinkedIn, and Humza was like, he's not going to reply. Dekh lo. This is when he just exited, Tamir Bank. He literally replied within 15 minutes, and that was a journey, to starting Tez. And so, that's when, Mozam Saab is sitting over here. I remember we had our first meeting for, the all microfinance network board meeting. And, we introduced our idea there. We got a lot of traction, but us waqt, the sector was going through change in regulations. So everyone was focused on that. And also, not a lot of people understood the value of technology, or they didn't have the budgets for technology. So
and it wasn't sexy back then. Like being a startup today is like super sexy. Funding mil gayi hai, ye hai, jeans pehen ke ja rahe hain.
Abhi bhi, it's not sexy. Trust me. When you're actually in it, it's it's an over glamorized field, really. So yeah, so that's that's when we thought we actually realized that if we are to do something, we'll have to show it to these institutions how to do it rather than going to them. And trying to do it with them. So yeah, that's how Tez came into being.
Yeah, and that's why we have you here to talk about failures rather than all the fancy and glamorous stuff that we hear around startups. So moving on, as I was saying earlier, that we haven't heard of many exits, at least in the Pakistani startup ecosystem, and it's so heartening to know that somebody has taken on that journey. And Tez Financial Services was, of course, one moment that definitely made you proud, and then made the entire Pakistani community proud. I would like to ask you, Naureen, that tell us, when was it the right time that you started planning for exit? After how many years of being into business and up and running and making profits and whatnot, how did you know it was the right time? What was the vision for TFS? Was it always part of the vision? And yeah, just please elaborate on that.
I don't know whether this will sound right, especially to investors, but I'm still going to speak the truth. Honestly, when we started, we never had a plan for exit. Well, when we started off, at least, that was never the plan. The focus was solely on the purpose that we set our eyes on, So, kabhi socha nahi tha exit kya hai, kaise karna hai. Yeah, we thought about the fact that end mein, how are we going to achieve that purpose that we started Tez for. And actually, this is interesting. So we were sitting with Mr. Salim Raza. He was the ex-governor of State Bank, and he happens to be also the board member of Planet 10. So किसी ने पूछा कि आप exit के बारे में क्या सोच है. And he was very, very stern about the fact that entrepreneurs को तो exit के बारे में सोचना ही चाहिए. That's a second story, but he's like, वो तो investors का काम है. Why are you guys thinking about an exit? You guys focus on the business. So, I partially agree with him to quite an extent, actually more than partially. And there's no wrong approach to it. A lot of entrepreneurs actually come into starting startups thinking the end goal is an exit, whether or not that's selling the company or it's being acquired or it's getting an IPO. I think that thought process to begin a company is flawed altogether, because then you're trying to aim for results that are not really true to your purpose. That can happen very easily. So I think for us, our purpose was at the heart of everything. And if an exit was going to come, in whatever way, whatever form or shape, we were lucky to have gotten it. So, end mein exit hota kya, that's also important. I think for everyone, exit might have a different meaning. Exit can be an acquisition, exit can be an IPO, exit could be, maybe just disassociating yourself as management and just taking a back seat and letting someone else lead it. But I think we were fortunate enough. So this one thing I actually heard was companies are never sold; they're bought. So we were not in the thought process of selling phase ever. We were lucky enough that we got offers on the table where people saw the value that we created enough, to just embrace it. So I think for us, with ZoodPay, the conversations actually started back in 2019 when they were looking to get into a partnership with us. And so, at that time, this is, they're in 6 countries, they've got global operations in 11 offices, and they were wanting to come to Pakistan to see how they could partner with a fintech and, deploy their operations over here. So those were how the conversation started. And, some other contenders on the table there were strategic fits with the organizations. And wo karte karte, the conversation just evolved into, getting acquired. And so, then the strategic thinking happened. And that was a journey in itself. I think Humza knows, God, that was a very exciting journey. I have learned so much in, that stage of how that exit was actually orchestrated, Mujhe ab samajh aaya. So there are like multiple players in it. It's not just the board, it's the investors, it's the other company's investors, it's the people who are involved in doing the due diligence, it's your team. There's so many people you need to orchestrate, and many a times you need to manage your co-founders as well. So
absolutely.
It was quite an experience, and I think we've been very, very fortunate it ended well.
Wonderful. So that's interesting to know that exit was never their plan, but as it came their way, they did take it into consideration. And then, of course, as we move forward, I'll talk about the challenges as well. As a follow-up question to this, Humza, why don't you start telling us about ZoodPay and how did the vision align with TFS?
Absolutely. So I think for myself and Naureen, I think the idea was that we need to make sure that we're able to create an impact in the ecosystem. So the purpose was to empower people financially. When we were going through this process of acquisition, we kind of sat down one day and we said, okay, let's do a NPV analysis. Let's see what's best for everyone, for the team, for us, for the investors. We kind of did an NPV analysis, and we found out that ZoodPay was probably like the last option. And,
shouldn't have said that, Humza.
So this was the last option. And then we're like sitting down, और मैंने कहा कि यार तुम्हारा gut क्या कहता है? And मैंने कहा कि यार gut जो है ना वो कहता है कि हमें ये Zood करना चाहिए. And I'm saying this because like the week before, Michael, who's the founder for Zood, had kind of come in, and he made the effort to kind of sit down with us and talk about what his vision for the company was. And because the values were so aligned in terms of not necessarily kind of business growth or product or nothing, like none of that, but just the actual value of what we want to achieve for Pakistan, I think because that was aligned, it kind of made sense that these are the people that we want to work with. And so, money does talk, but I think if you align together on the value system, I think you can go a lot further because economic conditions will vary. And, I think we were very lucky because our acquisition happened before the kind of global meltdown. And to be very honest, I think if it kind of had maybe been like another couple of months, maybe it would have been a very different story. But because the values are the same, we're able to kind of walk through this journey a lot more steadily and kind of focus on the bottom line. So that's how we kind of came to the decision that Zood should be the player that we work with. And I don't know, should I explain what Zood is for?
Yeah, I was about to say what.
Yeah.
What is Zood? And then you've been talking about values. What is this value system that
Absolutely.
you're talking so profoundly about? Do elaborate on that as well.
So I think for those of you who do not know, Zood is a Swiss company that operates in about 6 different markets. So Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and now Pakistan. They're focused on doing lending for the e-commerce niche. So it's a lending platform for e-commerce. They have 3 business units. One of them is a marketplace where they kind of generate and link together suppliers and buyers together. Then they have e-logistics arm, which kind of manages the fulfillment end for the logistic or for the sellers. And then on top of that, which is the real business, is the lending arm, right? So lending to consumers, lending to the retailers or the SMEs who do e-commerce. And that's the ecosystem that they have. And that's what they're trying to create. Oh, we have. Oh, yeah, ye bada hota
Still
hai.
getting the hang of
This is
the
still
transition,
happening. Yeah, absolutely. So that's what they do. And I think the value system that we aligned on there were like a couple of things that kind of made sense. So when doing business and kind of focusing on achieving kind of growth numbers and XYZ, I think there is, for both parties, there is this view that we must seek the truth, right? We must go to the bottom line to understand why is this metric behaving in a certain manner? Why is this customer saying this thing? Why are we pushing this particular product? And so there is constantly, stay away from the jargon that's not necessarily accurate, but focus on the truth element, which is in the business. The fundamentals of the business are very important, and they always need to make sense. So that was one alignment of vision. The second was, focus less on the narrative, focus more on the logic. So is it really going to make sense? Does this business model, is this product really going to make sense for the thing? Certain times, the media is really hypes up narratives and stuff. So I think focusing on the logical element was super important. And I think the third thing which I really admired about Michael, and I think I speak for Naureen as well, is don't tell, show. So actually do it and demonstrate this is what you mean rather than kind of just talking about it. So I think those were 3 things that really made sense for us.
I'd like to add to that actually. I think that was one side of the values. But I think if we are to look at it from a holistic perspective, and Humza alluded to it as well, for us, we've seen a lot of players coming into Pakistan with a very short-term vision and just focusing on the individual parts rather than the whole. So for us, one thing that really mattered was a long-term perspective for Pakistan and the business itself. So that was very important because, we would, for us, since we started our journey, it wasn't about just making profits, it was really the purpose that we started the company for. So I think that's one thing that we share, that vision, a long-term perspective. The second one, I think another one very important was having an ecosystem view. That's something that we did not have at Tez, not because we did not want to, but maybe because we didn't have the bandwidth to. And because these guys have been, all over in so many different countries, they've been able to build that ecosystem which actually strengthens that lending play. So, that's how we can have more control over the lending journey. So that really made it easier for us to, get aligned over there. And of course, the segments that we are serving, they're the same. So, those 3 things for us were also very important. And I'll actually take this opportunity also to highlight that So don't think of ZoodPay as a BNPL player, please. A lot of people tend to do that. While we do provide BNPL as an acquisition tool, the focus is on the online merchant and to build the entire ecosystem around the online merchant. So serving the supply and demand through BNPL, but BNPL is a very small part of it.
Some of our guests may not know what BNPL is.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's
buy now, pay later.
Okay.
So you can buy on a website in installments.
Yeah, somebody just Googled. Okay.
You did?
So yeah, I really liked what Humza said, that, seeing is believing. So show rather than, just tell. And then what you said, the long shot, one has to be in it for long term. अच्छा एक चीज़ बड़ी interesting है around exits. When we talk about IPOs, the initial public offering, they sound really, it always comes across as a success, the holy grail, ठीक है? फिर जब बात होती है acquisition or mergers की, so there's some sort of a negative connotation to it. And given that right now the country is in a very volatile situation because of the macroeconomic situation and our own political instability, my question to you is, and anybody can take this question, okay, how should acquisitions and mergers be actually perceived, especially when we are, walking on the rope? So,
Do you want to take that, or?
I can take that.
Okay.
You both can add to it, so no problem there.
Wait, why don't you start and then I'll add on?
Walking on the rope is a tough one. Not necessarily. You don't have to go through an acquisition when you're walking on the rope only, right? I don't know how to explain this. I don't have a child, but I think that's the easiest analogy over here. So, I think with children as well, you look for the best of environments and the best that you can actually give to them. You want to foster, and provide them the resources, that could take them to a level where you've inspired them to be at. A company is also very similar. Well, I'm sorry for all the parents over here, I don't mean any disrespect. But, so I think with an acquisition, the view really is to broaden the horizon to such an extent where you can actually take it to levels where you otherwise couldn't have alone, right? So that's how we look at it, that this acquisition, at least for us, and I think for most, every company, every industry has a different story for why they got into that acquisition. But for us, it actually broadened the horizon for us to take Tez to a level where, otherwise maybe alone we couldn't have, to expand to a much broader ecosystem play, or to expand to maybe other geographies where we couldn't have otherwise. So yeah, I think it's very important to understand how an acquisition is really triggered. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably get into it with the thought of IPO being the success factor, but that's not really the case. In the United States, for example, where most M&As happen, so about over 93% of the M&As that happen, they usually happen pre-Series B. And, at Series B, not a lot of companies are at a stage where they can do an IPO, IPO also calls for certain fundamentals. If you see for companies that have actually gone for IPOs, they're mostly post-Series B. We were at our Series A when we did the acquisition, when we were acquired. So, a lot of fundamentals come into play over there as well. And yeah, I think because the timing was such that, we had the offers on the table, it just made natural sense for us to actually, think of that vision beyond what we had then, other than just VC funding.
Yeah, I think I just want to add on one other element, right? So I think the objective is very important, and the objective that the business is trying to build. So I think if the objective is to cash out, then maybe an IPO or an acquisition makes sense. But if the objective is something else, then is to maybe get the company to go to a next stage. Maybe it is to kind of partner up and expand your service level. So it depends on what you want to achieve. I think, for example, Facebook's most successful acquisition, in my opinion, is probably either WhatsApp or Instagram, right? And supremely successful companies, right? Both of them independently on their own. But I think by the three of them joining hands together, they're able to kind of create a much bigger monster. And I say monster. So I think it really depends on what your objective is. And I think IPOs, like Naureen said, is for slightly more different fundamentals. And maybe earlier stage companies, it might just be too difficult to do that.
Yeah, thank you for giving a perspective on that. I think we've spoken at length about the history of Tez Financials, where it all began, and how the idea and the trigger of an acquisition or an exit came about. सब कुछ अच्छा लग रहा है so far, but I really want to poke you both to tell us about the challenges, those that were foreseen and especially the unforeseen challenges. How this acquisition became successful despite those challenges.
I want to take a stab at that first
Please,
before
please,
you kind of.
please do.
And I think एक जो चीज़ बड़ी important है कि challenges जो है ना post acquisition ही pre acquisition शुरू हुए. And it's not like everything happens behind closed doors and your teams don't know what's happening. Like when conversations like these start to happen, you realize that focus is shifted, and priorities are changing, and you don't know necessarily what the end goal or end is going to look like. So I think the first challenge that we had was talking to our team about it, and then we were like reasonably transparent. I think a couple of months before the deal actually went through, we kind of sat everyone down and we said, listen, we're going through this process. We don't know who's going to get retained. We don't know what the terms are going to be. We don't know anything, but we've kind of gotten into this conversation. And for some of you, the next few months may be very, very volatile. And I think one of the challenges, I don't know if it was the right move or not, but we're very happy that we were very transparent with the team, because I think other than one or two individuals, everyone kind of stuck around and said, oh, we're in it in the long haul, and we'll ride the wave with you. And that made, and alhamdulillah, it's been a fantastic journey since, but I think that was the first challenge that kind of definitely to navigate how do you deal with the team, offers happening left and right, how do you retain them? It's important for you to retain them because otherwise the business on the other end is not going to look at it positively. So all of those challenges were definitely there. So I think that is one big one. And then I feel like Naureen can talk about a lot of them because she orchestrated this entire deal, speaking to like 10 people at the same time, messaging and them at like different times and kind of saying, अच्छा आप ये कह दो, नहीं उसका ये मतलब था, नहीं ये बिल्कुल नहीं कह रहा था, उसका ये मतलब था. So it's not easy. It's a puppet show.
I really hope I wasn't the one managing the puppets, but I think that the journey to the acquisition itself. But then the challenges, I don't know what, it's probably is challenges, but entrepreneurs face that on a daily basis. That's what our work is, you confronted with challenges, whatever they might be on a daily basis. But I think one challenge was definitely while going through the process of acquisition, I think we've already spoken about that. And now that the acquisition has happened, it's still not over. It's just started the process. And honestly, it's been amazing so far. The learning experience itself, so I've often heard people saying that the core success factor for an acquisition to be successful or not is culture. And so far, I think what's really, really worked well for us is the alignment in cultures. And of course, the alignment in visions also. So that's really playing a great role in how the teams were already conditioned to, face what they're now facing. Of course, now it's a global team with 11 offices. Now our team is also learning a lot. So I think we really protected our team for the longest time. Now, the time is where they need to grow up very fast because they're, dealing on a completely different level altogether. So I think now helping them to get to that stage is also something that we at least seek as our responsibility. But right now, we've got our friends from the regulators here as well today. So that itself is a process, that transition. But I think it makes it much easier because One, our investors and the board, they have to be on the same page, and they were with us throughout. They gave us the autonomy to make those decisions, which makes it much easier. And the regulators, I think SECP is a phenomenal regulator. Since we're a regulated entity, and the acquirers are a foreign entity, which makes things a little more challenging or interesting with the requirements, SECP has really supported us throughout, and that process is still going. Let's see how things go on with the State Bank and the Competition Commission. But those are things that we are confronting on a daily basis. Yeah, I think a great learning experience for us.
I think एक और चीज़ जो like you touched upon it a little bit with the team, right? I think one of the things at an operating level which is really changing, and I think we're getting used to it, is the reporting structure has drastically changed, right? And so responsibilities for both Naureen and myself have changed, and then even for the team, kind of, अच्छा पहले ये था कि हमजा ने कह दिया, नौरीन ने कह दिया, कर लेंगे. Now this is a very different dynamic, and they kind of need to go through that kind of channel because there are about 600 people at Zood versus I think at the peak we had like 40 people. So it's a very, very different size, it's very different hierarchical structure, and I think for the team to get used to that is also different. And then we had a lot of autonomy, Naureen and I, in terms of making decisions, and I think that itself has also changed. So we need to get a lot more people on board into our decision-making process. They're not on ground. They're sitting in Russia, they're sitting in Georgia, they're sitting in Lebanon and in Switzerland, and then getting them to like bridge the local knowledge gap is quite a challenge. And it seems कि यार हर बंदा, हर entity, हर country इसी तरह से operate करती होगी, but that's not right. And so I think that's a new challenge that we're dealing with now.
Yeah, so I was actually about to ask a question along the lines of that. Now you are both at ZoodPay, the transition has happened or is still happening in a way. You're the CEO, you're the COO, your roles have changed, the dynamics between you two have changed, and you have spoken about team and all. Do you still get some sort of autonomy? Yeah, aap logon ki bhi, there are limitations around it, and then also tell me what kind of culture is there? How much of TFS is still, it has still migrated with you to ZoodPay, and is there any desire that you have? You gave a beautiful example of parenthood. वो जो एक desire हमेशा रहती है ना to retain that thing, वो कितनी है अभी तक? And if it changes for good, कैसे deal करेंगे? I do feel from this conversation that both of you are kind of headstrong people who are like ले आओ, challenges ले आओ, कर लेंगे fight, and then that's a beautiful spirit, and that is basically the entrepreneurial spirit, right? So थोड़ा सा और elaborate करें, consider it as an extension of what you were already saying, but just a little deep insight into it.
Do you want to start?
You can go ahead if you want to go first. We're definitely headstrong, like there is no doubt about that.
I would have termed it into opinionated, but chalo. Yeah, I think both of us we've got big entrepreneur egos, both of us, and I think all entrepreneurs do. It would be fair or unfair to say they don't. One has to manage your entrepreneur ego, and because we both are so opinionated and rather passionate about what we do, I think it's been an amazing journey that way as well, because we've pushed each other to try to be at our best and perform at our best. But how are you talking about before I go on to the role side, I think autonomy wali jo side hai, we've been very fortunate where we've actually gotten, again with Michael as well, he's been very, very supportive of letting us take ZoodPay in Pakistan the way we want to. Although of course there's a global direction that's required here. And शुरू में बड़ा मुश्किल लगता था. हमजा मुझे कहता था, भाई you're not the founder anymore, बस करो थोड़ा सा step back a bit. I used to be like, मुझे बहुत मुश्किल लगता था. I was like, हमजा मुझसे नहीं हो रहा, कैसे करूँ मैं But I think
relearning, unlearning,
yeah, that
learning.
वो कहते हैं ना design में you break your design, relearn, and then so I think that's one thing that I learned. But the good thing is that it actually the kind of people we are, even though we haven't founded ZoodPay, it still feels like we're embedded into the fabric of it. So we feel very much for it the way we actually felt for Tez. And legally, entity Tez ही है. But of course, overall now it's a global organization, and we're now working with global teams. ऐसा नहीं है कि पाकिस्तान में सिर्फ पाकिस्तान की team है. Now we have for example, our tech team sits in different parts of the world. Our product team sits, someone is sitting in France, someone is sitting in Georgia. So everyone is actually working like a big team. So, and we have the autonomy. We, soon inshallah we'll be announcing some updates at our end as well of what we've actually achieved in Pakistan already with ZoodPay. So and that's because I think Michael has given us that autonomy to steer things the way we want to. But I also feel, I think it's important to highlight, so Tez actually brought in a value that otherwise ZoodPay did not. I think that's the reason why this acquisition also happened, was that our focus was most on the lending side. ZoodPay, they did lending, but the focus was most on the e-com side. So I think that's where our strength also comes into play, and the team at ZoodPay respects that and understands that. So I think that's where we have more autonomy. Otherwise, as we wouldn't have if we didn't understand lending, I suppose. Yeah, so I think it's working out very well. And as for the roles, I think. Yeah,
I think they're being cemented in like what we had before. I think they're just being more cemented now.
पता है नहीं, I think थोड़ा सा I'd actually speak the truth.
I think you need to move your hair
It's
because
my hair?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that okay now? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. अच्छा, I think दूसरी चीज़ ये है कि when you're founders of a company, आपके पास leeway होता है कि आप अपने roles को pick कर सकते हैं. So, there can be a lot of stepping on each other's feet because you're wanting to do everything. And I would accept it. I have a severe case of FOMO. I have to know everything, And I think you also do.
For sure.
So, at least I had to train myself to step back and, let Humza have his domain and let, myself have my own.
Is it like micromanaging or just
No, I don't
being top of everything, on top
just
of everything?
Just wanting to know everything that's happening,
Okay.
But sometimes you have to learn to let go, You can't. बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है. So yeah, I think now because we have been given those roles set in paper कि आप ये करें, आप ये करें, it's much easier now, So it's we have actually very मजे की story है. I remember when we were actually deciding on that hiring process for Zood right now.
Oh, right.
And उन्होंने हमने सबके सामने लिखा था responsibility किसकी क्या है.
Right.
So मेरे नाम के सामने कुछ चीज़ें थी, हमजा के नाम के सामने कुछ चीज़ें थी जो पहले हम दोनों एक साथ देखते थे. So I was like, यहाँ मेरा नाम क्यों नहीं है,
Naureen, I think we can exchange.
I think I can you guys hear me? I can speak like this if for the mic, okay. So I think वो चीज़ पे मुझे I had to really relearn, and yeah, I think थोड़ा सा समझ आई है मुझे. Well, you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it reasonably well. So I think the main difference is I get into the nitty-gritty on the operational side. She deals with all the difficult stuff, which is like people, which is the regulator, which is the legal, which is the finance, which is the compliance, which is all of that. So I think that kind of I think that bifurcation is now kind of more nuanced. Yeah, I think our roles are also evolving because there's a lot of knowledge that we have that we want to take to the global level. So I think अभी जो है transition हमारा चल रहा है, and as the transition kind of gets completed, I think we'll be more clear as to exactly what each person is doing and how they're doing it and so on and so forth. I feel like this is not working. Yep. No, it's not. But
Does he need to repeat all that he said?
no.
Still audible. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Trying to keep a check on time.
Absolutely. So yeah. So anyways, that's what it was. I think the roles are evolving. It's still reasonably fresh, right? It's only a couple of months old. So yeah, so I think that's the
And you
process.
have a team of about how many people?
Like in Pakistan now?
And then overall who are reporting to Zood Pakistan, let's say.
So I think recently we've just kind of gone through a restructuring, and we have like a huge bunch of the global technology and the product team now reporting for Pakistan. So because we're focusing on deploying the infrastructure here. So I think that is maybe about like, I would say like 50-ish people, Nina? Yeah, 50-ish people kind of reporting in to the Pakistan office for the Pakistan launch. But it's not like that's their only thing that they do. They, there's 6 countries that they need to manage. So it's reasonably flat, the structure. It's not a lot of huge vertical structure. It's reasonably flat. So it's just domain expertise that people kind of bring in and then come in and work.
Sounds good. I think because in the best interest of time, given that they both have to travel back as well, I would like to conclude this beautiful conversation, which I really don't want to conclude. It's been so interesting. I think just as we conclude, it's very important for you to give us a parting message to us and our audience that is online and the audience that will be watching this episode after this session and maybe for a few years to come as well. क्या कहना चाहेंगे उनसे as entrepreneurs, as somebody who aspires to be an entrepreneur?
Find the right team. I think like your partners really define who you are, and I think we've been very fortunate to find each other and of course the broader team as well. And I think it seems like this is a one-person job, but it's far from it. So finding the right people, making sure you guys have the same values and you're after the same purpose. I think everything else follows second.
I definitely second that. I think if I'm to add, just find the right purpose. Don't get into it because it's. Don't get into entrepreneurship because it seems like a fancy thing to do.
It's difficult.
You need a purpose, and you have to remain true to that purpose. And I say this often, I talk about these 4 P's, purpose, passion, the power of the pack, and pivot, So you need to have a purpose, pursue it with passion, get the right team to, pursue it with you, and just don't get too attached to your ideas. You can get attached to your purpose, but there can be 2 different ways of achieving that purpose, So we talked about this last time.
Yes, we did.
So be flexible to pivot if you have to. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Naureen and Humza, for that amazing and insightful conversation. But I think it's good enough to give this opportunity to our audience as well. If they have any questions, please take this opportunity and ask away. Of course, Taha.
Do you want this?
By the way, sorry for joining in a bit late. I was actually in a meeting with my partner. So I believe I missed all that fun part.
You can watch the episode. Yeah.
Okay.
You must.
So my question is, being a startup, right? And considering current Pakistani situation, international world economic situation, are you guys not scared or maybe afraid of uncertainty? Like what will happen exactly? What if things go wrong? What if there would be a war or XYZ? I mean, right now the situation is completely uncertain. You can't say exactly what will happen next year. So from where do you guys, getting all that courage and moving forward?
You sound like my board member. So Kabir, a board member from Flourish. So Flourish was one of our investors in Tez. That's Imidiyar network. And I remember when COVID struck, we survived a pandemic, so nothing could be more uncertain than that. So I remember Kabir, we used to be Kabir is in DC. So I remember having calls with him at 2 a.m. in the morning, har raat ko almost, So much so his wife also remembers that, whenever he used to get a call, he used to be like, is that Naureen? So he said, things are so uncertain, what are you guys thinking next? So my response to him was that entrepreneurship is all about uncertainty. We got into this knowing that, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. So I think if you're actually getting into it thinking that everything is going to happen according to plan, then sorry, this is not for you. Entrepreneurship is all about uncertainty, and you live it a day at a time. And then it's you have to confront it that way. Otherwise you'll die. Mentally. Seriously.
It's too much planning otherwise.
You can't. And I'm a crazy perfectionist. I thought everything happens according to plan, but nothing happens according to plan. So you have to let go of that.
Have you learned a lesson or
A lot of them.
Ji, please.
I just have a question from the exit perspective, right? So Humza, you really touched upon the values were aligned with that particular investor. But what are like the top 3 or 4 fundamentals that you look for if you have more than one option for your exit? Because I believe you guys were fortunate enough to have those options. So what were your top 2 or 3 concerns?
ये ना एक VC वाला बंदा बोल रहा है, पता चल रहा है ना कि VC क्या देख रहा होता है.
So I think one of the really important things for us was, would we be able to thrive in that environment, right? Because I feel like there will always be hand-holding and always be like transfer of knowledge and all of that, right? And if the other party is not ready to do that, like mentally, or is not open to that kind of thought process, I think it becomes very, very challenging. So I think mind mapping, for lack of a better word, is super important. That's one. You want to talk about the others?
You can share more. So from what I understood of the question was more so around what would be the top, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what would be the top strategies of exit for you?
No.
Or
Values.
Choosing the right partners, because you had more than one option.
Yes.
What were the top 2, 3 factors that you kept in mind when you chose Zood rather than someone else?
So honestly, for us, of course, financials, a lot of people keep them at the top. That was not for us on the top, although I think that is important at some level. But of course, that's one of it. What was more important was the alignment in vision. What is it that the strategy is going to be post, the acquisition? Because we were going to be continuing working with them. And if it was something that we didn't believe in, our life would have been hell. So that was one. Secondly was, so how do they actually interact with the rest of the team? So it's great to, to see how the top tier is, but if the mid tier is not really sharing that vision, that also reflects a lot on what the company, culture is. So that's second. And of course, then, things like what the metrics are around the company, how well are they instilled in other parts of the world? How do the numbers speak for them? How do other companies around them speak for them? What kind of investors do they have? So there's so much that goes into it, So we saw all of that, and of course our interactions with them, because also what value they were laying, what were the things that they were looking in us when they were actually valuing us. That actually showed a lot about, their thought process as well. So I think that's also very important.
I just want to add one more thing. इसमें जो दूसरी चीज़ बड़ी I think important है वो ये था कि because we were so close to the company and what we created, we didn't want that to kind of go to someone just to be shut down. So I think that was another really, really important thing. A lot of times acquisitions happen so that they can shut down competition. Luckily this was not that case, but that's something else that we kind of looked at. कि यार जो चीज़ build की है उसको हम आगे कैसे बढ़ा सकते हैं, उसकी value कैसे और extract कर सकते हैं.
Yes, Farha.
So my question is related to the investors. So you were backed by Planet and some other investors, right? So since this is Pakistan's first M&A, right? So do you think our
It's not, but please.
at that point in time, I think around a couple of months back. So do you think what kind of stakes do you think or an investor has when this kind of decision is taking place? And if any, did you face some challenges or when having these kind of conversations with your investors? So that's my question.
Do you want to take that?
No. I don't want to take that question.
So, Planetain was one of the investors, but we had two other investors. One was Axion. Axion is the largest microfinance investor in the world. And Flourish, which is a media network, they're the largest impact investor in the world. So it's important to name them because they had a phenomenal role in our journey, you know. So this deal wouldn't have happened if, you know, they wouldn't have had been on the same page. So the first thing is actually to get your investors and your board on the same, you know, vision or the same plan as you. Only when, you know, I think for us, we were very fortunate because they were always very supportive of whatever we thought. Of course, there were questions into, you know, who are these guys, you know. For them, because they have global operations, it matters a lot, you know, how their reputation also works. So a lot went into that thought process of which entity would we actually go by when we decide for which offer to accept. Yeah, so I think pretty much it's always very important to make sure they come on the same page, but it's not always very easy, you know. It took us about 6 months to close this deal, like.
So about 6 months, roughly.
And not only our investors, you know, you have to satisfy the other side also. So I literally had to orchestrate strategies with their strategy people, you know. So
their investors actually came to visit
Yes.
us and meet us and do like their own due diligence on who we are. So
yeah, so that also happened. It's literally like, you know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, right? It was something like that because unki side said it was literally like matchmaking happening, you know.
रिश्ता आया.
Rishta, right? It was really interesting, yeah.
हमने समोसे अच्छे बनाए थे.
Do we have anybody else? Salahuddin?
Naureen, the journey has been quite interesting. I'm working as a management consultant at a consultancy. I prepare business growth plans and business model canvases. So it was quite interesting when you actually mentioned your values, or the values that you used to have at Tez Financial, and then how you took those forward, when the transition basically happened. So my question to you is that value propositions are very, very important whenever you are moving forward with a business plan or a business model canvas. How did you carry those value propositions which you initially had at Tez Financial with you while you were acquired by ZoodPay? Were you able to carry those forward? Because values are quite different from value propositions as we understand. So that's what it is.
Okay. If I understand correctly, you're asking about the business value proposition. So what is it that we created and how is that being used or leveraged? So I think जो main चीज़ हमने की है पाकिस्तान में कि एक बंदा जिसकी कोई क्रेडिट हिस्ट्री ना हो उसको लोन कैसे दे सकते हैं, उसको किस तरह से एनालाइज कर सकते हैं और जब उसको लोन दें तो उससे रिकवर कैसे कर सकते हैं ये. So we went after a class of individuals that was underbanked, that was not being served either by microfinance or by the commercial banking sector. And I think it was that knowledge base that was attractive to the business. Tez was in the business of doing nano loans, which are uncollateralized, small ticket, small tenor cash loans. Zood is not in that business. So they're not using the same product that we've had, but they're using the knowledge base that we've created around how do we do lending, what are the metrics that we need to look at. And lending is not only just about simply just about an algorithm, it's a complete journey right from the start of acquiring the customer to onboarding him, to educating him, to issuing him the credit limit or assessing the credit, to kind of educating him or telling him कि यार आपकी पेमेंट कब ड्यू है, किस तरह से देनी है, अगर दोगे तो क्या बेनिफिट्स होंगे, नहीं दोगे तो क्या नहीं होगा, and then eventually recovering that money, and then most importantly graduating him to the next stage, right? So I think it's that entire kind of puzzle that we're taking forward and we're pushing through Zood, because like Naureen earlier mentioned, they were very much e-com focused, and so this entire kind of fintech lending experience is what we bring to the table now.
Just another question, So, quite a cliche, but where do you see yourself, in a couple of years? Because it's very important to understand that, I think the position in the Pakistani market, quite a volatile market, something, being in the fintech industry, which is actually quite new for the Pakistani market. What's the vision? Where do you see yourself in a couple of years?
I think, you want to speak for it, or continuing to make people financially empowered. That's where I see myself. So it's not about job, it's not about startup, it's not about is this company, that company. It's about, like, for me, it's for purpose. And I speak for Naureen as well. I think when we started off, it was a purpose that we went after, and I think we will continue to go after. And we've pivoted like 6-7 times through this journey, right? So पहला startup, उसके 3-4 दफ़ा iterations बनाई, तेज आया, तेज की 2-3 iterations से गुजरा. So हमारे लिए purpose important है, और वो कैसे purpose achieve की जा सकती है, I think that's what we're going to go after. Everything else will follow. That's at least what I believe.
If I may add to that, I think, see, volatile times दुनिया में हर जगह है इस वक्त. It's not only Pakistan. Of course, startups के लिए there's an entire ecosystem. It's not only about the idea. You need funding. You need,
Teams,
a lot more.
So much more.
So I think from that perspective, and what's going on in Pakistan right now, impact लाने के लिए, there's so many things that we can actually look up into. Right now, of course, the next 2 years we will be working, with Zood. Let's see आगे क्या होता है. But I think but again, speaking for you as well, whatever we do, it's going to be towards bringing an impact. That could be, for me at least, financial services के अलावा भी there's so many areas, that I feel very, very strongly about. So I think time will tell. But right now we're really enjoying, working for the cause that we're working for.
Yes, I would like to take one last question. Yes, please.
When we talk about any company or startup for that matter, particularly, so when we look at the success or failure, so it's not about 1-2 persons, like people are obviously the CEO and COO, but it's the people and it's the team that actually make it happen. So when you hire talent, so the question has two parts. A, when you are a startup and there's a history of failures as well, so how big is that a challenge to attract a quality resource? Because obviously they are apprehensive of the growth or the future of the company. A. B. When you hire talent, what are 3 or 4 qualities that you look in the resource that you are hiring that you achieving your targets and missions for your startup?
Are you lying to us?
Yeah, so the lawyers.
Yeah, again, super question. And talent acquisition is like one of the toughest thing to do for a startup. I think 3 चीज़ें हैं जो एक चीज़ जो हमने अच्छी नहीं की थी, like Naureen mentioned, I think our brand building efforts weren't that strong, and I think you need to do that to acquire the best talent. I think a lot of other startups have realized that, and they're doing a superb job, and kudos to them for doing that and attracting that. The second thing which is super important when attracting good talent is good compensation. Again, we were never the best payers in the market, but we did provide a platform where team members have left and founded other startups. So I think one of the things that we kind of focused on was, अगर हम like if there's a person, sorry यार आप थोड़ा सा side पे हो जाओगे? Thank you. So like I think one of the things that we did focus on when going through this hiring process was how ready was the individual to join such an uncertain environment. And exciting but uncertain environment, right? So if someone's coming in saying कि यार मैं 9 से 5 जाऊँगा, मैं सिर्फ अपनी JD के हिसाब से काम करूँगा, मुझे साल में 30 days off चाहिए और मुझे annual bonus जो है मेरे contract में लिखी होनी चाहिए, is not someone who's gonna stay the long run for us.
I think you've been thinking about that a lot, huh?
I can relate. Yeah. So I think those kind of people are not necessarily kind of fit for at least to work with us. Maybe some other companies it's different. And independence. I think it's really important for people to have the ability to like work independently and work in environments where maybe they're doing 2 people's jobs. I know Naureen does like 7 people's jobs every day. So it's difficult, and very honestly जब तक बंदे से face to face बात नहीं होती ना वो समझ नहीं आता, और जब बात भी हो जाती है तो पहले 3 महीने नहीं गुजरते ना, समझ नहीं आता कि बंदा हमारे लिए fit था भी या नहीं था. We've had reasonably good, I think, stickiness, yeah, reasonably good stickiness with the team. So we haven't gone out and overhired. We haven't gone out and paid exorbitant salaries. The other thing which was really interesting to us was people weren't interested in sweat equity. So this was another kind of, cash versus sweat equity. They would always go for cash. So this was another kind of learning, and I think people, and I think it's maybe like an economic thing. So if you come from a much more stable economic environment, you're able to take that risk. So I think that also kind of played a role in terms of who was able to come on and join the team. But we've had some really good talent and who've stuck around with us. I think you want to say?
Yeah, definitely. See, a lot of these things that Humza mentioned, there were also reasons for us for having filtered people. But I think सबसे important for me was, and we made sure every person who joined Tez and even now ZoodPay, we have been involved personally in that hiring process. Because the most important thing is culture. And if they're not aligned culturally, even no matter how competent they are, we're not going to take them on the team. Because that can make it or break it for the entire team. And also I think even though we probably weren't paying as great salaries as some of the newer startups who raise a lot of funding, for us what was more important is that they were aligned with the vision as well. And that's what makes them stay, because that purpose, that's there. That's what's happened with our team now, I'm super, immensely grateful to them, because even till the end, there were people who said, we'll stay on till the end and see how things go, So that says a lot about, what they believe in.
All right, I think with that we have come to an end of this beautiful conversation. We could, I think, go on for hours and hours, and I'm sure you have so much to share with us, which also means we can invite them again. So I would like to thank our esteemed speakers, Naureen and Humza. It has been such a pleasure to host you on Duckstories, and I hope our audience are going home with a lot of learning. And I would like to invite everybody to meet them over networking tea. And just a round of applause for everyone. Thank you so much.